For those of you who I don't know, my name is Thea Andrews. I am a member of the Board of Directors of Visionary Women, and it is my great pleasure to be welcoming you all today and facilitating this conversation with our very special guest, the Mayor of Compton, April Brown. As I mentioned before, we're grateful to our board member, Monique Brown, who introduced us and made this possible. So thank you, Monique. And I'm just really excited to have this opportunity because Mayor Brown, we were talking about you in your absence. I was talking a little bit about your work in the city of Compton. And for those of you that have been following your work and your many extraordinary achievements in the city of Compton, we have seen that you have such an innovative leadership style and a clear vision throughout your tenure there, and really an approach to service that is unique. And as I was saying before, I think is perfectly suited to meet the very specific challenges of the time that we are living in right now, not just in the city of Compton, but across our nation. So I'm very excited to have you here. You have always been a step ahead of the curve. A little history and a little bio on you. You made history when you were elected to office at the age of 31. You're now all of 38 in your second mayoral term. And in that time, Mayor Brown has successfully been revitalizing the city of Compton with her 12-point plan. And she has dramatically reduced crime and violence in the city. She's brought thousands of new jobs to the city, huge investment, and hope back to a city that frankly, people had written off for a long time, and she is getting the job done. So Mayor Brown, as we saw, you are a very busy woman. We're lucky to have your time today. I know there's a lot going on. Welcome, and thank you for taking this time to be with us.
Absolutely. I just want to thank Monique for extending the opportunity. And when she shared a little bit about the group, I thought it was just a great way to connect with some powerful women that are doing great work. So happy to be here this morning.
Well, Visionary is the title of our group, and anyone who knows the work that you do knows that everything you do is about vision. You are the ultimate visionary women. So it's such an honor to be here with you. I have so many questions about your history and about everything you've done. And I know the people that are watching are going to have questions as we talk to. So please send them to us as you go if you have questions for Mayor Brown, and I will we'll take some questions at the end. I'm going to try not to hog all the time, even though I know I'm going to want to, because there's just so much to talk about what you've achieved in the city of Compton. But I do want to start by addressing what is going on right now and asking you how you're doing, because I know you've been dealing for months, obviously, with this crisis of this global pandemic, the resulting economic impact, which has been devastating for so many cities. And more recently, of course, these protests that have been in your city, like so many others. I know you were on the front lines talking to protesters. This morning, you were delayed by issues going on in your city. So what is your world like right now? What is it like to be mayor in the city of Compton right now?
It's just hectic, more hectic than it has ever been. But at the same time, I'm still really hopeful because I see our community really coming together in a beautiful way, and people that are really stepping up to be allies of just restoration and really just regeneration of our community. So it's a really busy time, but I'm still kind of working on adrenaline because there's so much opportunity, I think, in this window that we're all living in.
You've always been a person that where other people see problems, you see opportunity. It's really a hallmark of your leadership style. I have noticed though, with some of the mayors that I've seen on the news, as they're talking about what they're facing in their city in this time, you can see for some of the mayors, it's been very difficult. I saw Mayor Bottoms of Atlanta, for example, talking about the new executive orders that she is introducing there to overhaul police use of force. I know that this is something that you're dealing with in Compton as well. And you could see that there's some conflict of being empathetic to the cause of these protesters, of being often ideologically aligned with them and wanting to be compassionate, but also having to balance that with, first of all, wanting to keep peace in your city, because no mayor wants to see businesses being burned or riots in their city, and also the fact that you have, you know, police officers that work for you and you're their boss too. So what has it been like for you to navigate that challenge? And on a personal level, as a mother, as a community member, how has it affected you to try to walk that line?
For me, I just look at everything that's happening as really an outcome of a deeper issue. And so, you know, we talk about protesters. People have been protesting for years, but to the level and magnitude that we're seeing across the nation and the world is really prolific. And for me, I'm human first. I really relate to my community, and I can understand what we're going through. And I don't even say it's them because it's us. I've had my own experiences with law enforcement that have not been favorable, even in my own city. We're with the sheriffs, and so they rotate deputies in and out of our city, so they may not know who we are or who have any relationship with the community, and so that presents a problem. But on the converse, we just approved a new law enforcement review board to take complaints out of the hands of the sheriff and to allow the city to be that vehicle, and also to tap in with the county's Office of Inspector General that now has subpoena power. So I'm currently mobilizing other communities that contract with the sheriffs to launch our own joint powers authority to be able to implement some system-wide changes with the sheriff's department. Also, with the caveat that if the sheriff doesn't want to come to the table and work with us, then we're willing to start a new law enforcement agency with the collective cities that's focused on, you know, doing a lot of work from policy and reform. And again, I see it as a big one to affect the type of change that we need in our cities. In terms of just the unrest and everything that's happening, we are really just blessed in Compton that, I mean, all of our cities around us, they had rioting and property damage and even fires, but Compton was very safe. We didn't have any of that. And I think my community, they sent so many messages and Facebook posts and Instagram, and they're just like, we've come too far. So that really touched my heart for them to recognize that, you know, we've spent so much time and effort and energy to restore our city, and we want to just keep moving forward. So I just give all of the credit to our community members for being bought into for progress for our city.
What was your message to those protesters? I saw you out speaking to people on the streets, on the front lines. What were you saying to the people on the streets?
It was really about that this is our opportunity to unify, and that there's few things that people can control in life, and you can't control how people see you, you can't control how people treat you, but we can control the way that we treat each other in our community. And so unity was really the message. It wasn't even a protest, it was a peace walk. We had thousands of people come out to just exhibit peace. It was about empowerment, and I think that a lot of the healing that has to take place in America, it has to start, and I believe, within the African American community and the brown community as a whole, because we can't expect for us to seek validation from outside of the community until we can deal with ourselves. And so I really talked a lot about, you know, how can we, as a community of Compton, have our own core values and move forward, independent of what the forces that be, white supremacy that we know is entrenched in our systems. So we have a collective determination to move forward. So that was really the message, that we have our own agenda. We need to move forward. We're thankful for the allies that we have. There were not just Black and brown people, there are white people, all people out there with us. And so I just believe that it's a beautiful moment in time to have this much unity around justice for people of color.
You were talking about that word systems that we've heard so much now as we're reading about what's happening right now in the country. And I think one of the most critical aspects about your approach to change and your approach to problem solving throughout your tenure, is that you look at a community and you always see the problem with the system, not the people. And when you're talking about the people in your community, you always say, you've said in the past that, well, systems may fail, but that doesn't mean the community is a failure. In some cases, the systems fail, but the people didn't fail. We don't count the people out. How has that marked the way that you've approached change?
I think it's just essential. I look at people as just human beings, and we all have different starting points. We all have different obstacles that we have to endure and overcome. And just really thinking about, and it's just important to treat people the way that we want to be treated. So I don't care somebody's station in life. Everybody has their own challenges, but at the same time, I look at how can we provide more opportunities? How can we adjust systems to be able to provide equity and access and opportunity to our young people, especially. And I just remember my own upbringing and, you know, going to USC, and for the first time recognizing that the education that I attained was inferior to my peers, and how demoralizing that was, that I was a 4.0 student in AP classes and I just still wasn't prepared. And so those type of psychological impacts that people of color impact, that's just one tip of the iceberg. And so there's so much that just has to be unpacked. And I think that for the first time, I'm just grateful to be living in this time, that we've slowed down. We were forced in this pandemic to just look around and start listening and really thinking about what's happening. And so I just believe that there will be so much systematic change that we can, and it's already happening now, that will really be about equity and restoration. And I think that we're, for the first time, thinking about the condition of Black people and Brown people in a different way, because obviously, and one of the things that I even conveyed in my message to the peace ralliers was that, we're one of the only people on earth that were disconnected from our homeland. We don't have our own languages. Our culture was intentionally wiped out. And so we have to focus on restoring our own humanity and our own core values. And so that's really the focus that I have for my community, is just continue to move forward. Let's keep building, and let's make sure that we're not allowing the systems that be to define our outcomes or our worth or value.
I want to talk a little specifically about some of the programs that you implemented in your city and the way that you've gone about doing this, because it's fascinating, I think, how ahead of the curve you've been. And I'm curious to know where your perspective came from, and I'm going to ask you about that as well. But when you first came into office, there was a spike in crime in your city, and you responded by taking an approach that no one had taken before. You launched a community policing task force. You brought together all the parties that were involved. You had them meet on a Sunday, gang members, Bloods and Crips, in a circle, an actual circle, in a talking circle, and ask those people what they wanted for their community. How did they envision their community? What did they want for their children? And no one had ever done that before. Why did you take that approach?
Well, a couple of reasons. Well, one, it was just a necessity for me. I didn't have the option to add additional law enforcement to our community, so I knew that the solution had to come from us. And I'm just a firm believer that hard conversations can produce just radical change, but you have to be willing to listen and to hear people from their heart, from their own perspectives. It's just so rich. You can learn so much. So I came from a perspective that this is all out of love. I came to learn, to listen, and to figure out how we can craft a strategy that would address the needs of the community. You can't serve people without talking with them and really hearing about what their challenges are. And I think that that's really like the clinical approach to government, is that people think they have all the answers and they come with these plans or programs and they still are not even focused on the targeted outcomes. So for me, it was just about, if I know I have violence in my city, let me go to the people that are creating violence and figure out if they're willing to change their behavior, and if they're willing to buy into a collective future that is a different behavior. So that was really the impetus of it all.
And it turns out that they actually were. I mean, a lot of politicians might have responded to that by saying, okay, crime is out of control, violence is out of control, homicides are out of control. So what's the natural reaction? We need to invest more money in law enforcement. But instead of spending the money in law enforcement to put extra officers on the street, which you said you didn't have it, so you came up with an innovative solution, but you did invest $250,000 in a gang intervention program. What was the outcome of that?
It was wonderful. We had the lowest just crime rate that we've had in Compton's like 30 to 40 year history. We had 13 homicides, which at the peak of Compton's highest violent times, we had over 100 homicides. Even when I came into office, the average was 40 homicides per year. So we experienced the lowest level of crime. We really focused on outreaching to young people, and those are just one of the programs. It was a pilot program because of political will. It didn't continue, but we're in a great window of opportunity, so we're working to bring that back as well.
Well, I think the approach you took in terms of spending money in this program, instead of on just bumping up your policing, is so, the vision that you had to do that is so relevant at this current moment, as you know, so many Americans are finally, it seems, waking up to the fact that we do need to make changes in how we approach law enforcement in this country. And of course, there's unfortunately a large segment of the population who are acutely aware that the system was not working for everyone. But there's also a lot of people who are ignorant about that or in denial about that. And And if you were, well, you can't really be anymore because it's been on your TV set for 22 days, that the system is not working for everyone and there needs to be change. So as we find ourselves in this time of really reckoning with what some would consider systemic failure, we find out that a wound has grown and that the distrust has become so deep that we now have nationwide calls to just defund the police. And frankly, I think there's some confusion around that because that phrase, I think, means different things to different people. Some people are talking about abolishing police. Some people are talking about using funds to divert into other programs, as you did. And that, I think, confusion causes fear. So I think we should demystify this a little bit if we can. And I'd love to hear your perspective on what defunding the police actually means or should means, what it might mean in your city. I know we've taken steps in the city of LA, and what you think the outcome will be, and if you think it will be effective in creating the potential to actually have safer cities and cities that are healthy cities.
Well, first, I definitely think that redirecting financial resources is essential if we expect to have different outcomes. I think that defunding the police is different than disbanding the police. In Compton, 20 years ago, we disbanded the Compton PD because of corruption, and we brought in the sheriff's department. So that is a very different process than defunding. So defunding is just redirecting some of the resources that are utilized for officers to mental health caseworkers, to youth programs, to community policing, and just different relationship building. So it's really a programmatic response to addressing the causal factors of crime. And when we look at the statistics, over half of the people incarcerated within LA County alone, they've had issues with mental illness. And so we can no longer continue to utilize our jail system to be the response to a failure of our system to provide adequate access to care. And mental health is just a real issue, and especially in communities of color where we have less access to health care. There's already a stigma with addressing mental health and wellness. And so the response of adding more officers to try to suppress an issue is not ever going to alleviate it. So there has to be a change. And that's what defunding the police is all about.
I want to circle back to this idea of systems, because that's, as I said before, a word that we're hearing all the time now, problems being systemic. And you said from the beginning of your tenure, you said that there are casualties of having bad systems in place, decades of bad systems in place. In Compton, for example, you were dealing with decades of corruption, disinvestment, the culture that grew out of that. So as someone that spent nearly a decade doing the work that you have been doing, disassembling bad systems, trying to rebuild new ones, what lessons have you learned that you think you could apply to the issues that we are now facing on a national stage? And how do you see that background and experience as preparing you to maybe take a role on working on these problems on a federal level eventually?
I think number one is just natural to expect resistance. People are just naturally resistant to things that we don't change, that we don't know, or that's linked to change. People don't want to change behaviors. And so the first thing is understanding that if we can first identify what the problem is and then start working on the solutions, and it really requires communication and education. So I think right now, what you all are doing is just really taking the time to learn more about the extent of the systemic oppression is just critical, because if we can't even properly identify the issue, then it's impossible for us to work together to address it. And so I've had so much resistance. I've been through so many battles in Compton, working to affect change, and I've just learned that opposition is par for the course. But at the same time, if we can find common ground and through consensus building and say, okay, we're not going to agree on everything, but we can agree that maybe we need to change the tactics of law enforcement. That's one win that everyone can work collectively toward. If we can understand that there needs to be a different response to mental health, that's another win that can have a very large impact in terms of statistically. We can all understand that there has to be a different relationship of law enforcement with the community, and say, well, let's invest in community building and training and tools. Then I just think that if people can understand and coalesce around the challenge and commit to walking through the solutions, then change can come. But there's always going to be resistance. I think that people sometimes are just cut off because someone doesn't agree with their viewpoint, and that's fine. We're not all going to have the same viewpoint because we have different perspectives. We live different lives. We've had different experiences, but different perspectives are so rich, and you can come to a more exhaustive and effective solution by having those different perspectives. So I just think everything starts with conversations and common ground.
It's funny though, because even though we have so many different perspectives, I think we have more common ground than not. I think most people want kind of the same things for their communities when you really get down to it. I mean, you found that when you spoke to the Crips and the Bloods and asked them what they wanted for their life and their children, you know? So it seems what really gets in the way of this is the divisiveness in politics. And we are in a time right now where politics is more divisive than ever. There's a lot of partisanship, and that's really the antithesis of how you work. You are all about collaboration. You are all about building consensus. You are all about striving for unity. So how hard has it been for you to operate like that in a combative political climate? How do you bring people into, what's your secret sauce for bringing people into a conversation instead of just putting up their hand and saying we're on different sides of the aisle?
I always challenge people that we can't stay where we are, and regardless if you're a Democrat or a Republican, there has to be some things that we can agree upon. We may not agree on the vehicle to get there, but at least we can agree that these are the places that we need to go. And then I'm also just really real with people. I've been in many situations with politicians of all levels, and I've just shared with them that the whole Democrat versus Republican is so archaic, and I've challenged them that you're acting like gang members. The fact that you believe your party is going to separate you from being able to work with someone across the aisle and come with solutions for the people you swore to serve is just almost criminal, especially at this point in time. So I just think we have to have a redefinition of political parties and to recognize that we're all here to move a common good. We're all one nation. It doesn't matter what you subscribe to, but at the end of the day, we all want the same things for our communities, and we have to find a way to work together to do that. And there's going to have to be some give and take. Everyone's not going to get everything that they want, but we should all be committed to the process. And that's what I would like to see at the national level with leadership.
And you have some real credit on this, because if you can get the Crips and the Bloods to get together in a room and chat and work together for a ceasefire, because they both wanted investment in their community. They wanted these Fortune 500 companies that you were bringing in. If you can get them to do that, I think you can do this in Washington. I have complete faith. I just laugh because for a girl who says, she wasn't interested in becoming a politician, you really have turned out to be a natural at this, Mayor Brown. I'm sort of curious why you never envisioned that for yourself. You said you were obviously in urban planning. You'd graduated from USC. You'd gotten your master's in urban planning. You were working in planning and economic development roles, and something changed. You didn't want it. You didn't like politics. You didn't want to be a politician. What was the tipping point for you?
I recognize after working in the field, I always thought that I could just stay separate. Like most people think that, I don't want to be engaged in politics, but at the same time, the more that I worked and I learned and gained experience, I recognized to have systematic change, you have to address the policies. And if you want to address policies, you need to be a policymaker. So that was just the rationale into even getting involved. It just, I knew that the vision that God gave me for my city, I knew I couldn't do it where I was. And so I knew that I had to step out there and take a position that I could actually affect that change from the top down instead of trying to push from the bottom up. And so it was really about, how can I have an impact? And I don't know if I'll ever or if I will always be a politician, but I know that I love to solve problems. So as long as I can solve some challenges, then I'll continue to be in that role and serve.
Part of that vision, you said, comes from your mom. You had a single mom, and you've said that she instilled in you what you call heart-based leadership, that you believe in servant leadership. What does that mean to you, servant leadership?
I just I love people. And my number one goal is to pour out love on people. And I want them to feel the love, and I want them to know that everything that we're doing is because I care. And so if people know that you have a connection with them and that you're doing something out of love for them, they're usually more willing to work with you and not be against you. So I know that I also recognize in my community that with all of the issues we've had over decades and the corruption and the break of trust, that I had to start with a firm foundation and recognizing that the only way to address neglect is to pour out love and care. So, and to recognize that some people, they've never even experienced, someone that actually cares or a leader that's transparent. And there's always, the incredulous people, and then they'll come on board. But at the same time, it's just about being human and recognizing that if we're going to affect other human beings, we need to make sure that we're on that lateral field and operating in that mindset.
I mean, I hate to, I have to say, I just have to say, this is something that would, hearing you speak like this, I can't even imagine a male politician speaking like this. And I don't want to diss the guys because obviously we have so many wonderful male politicians, but when you talk about that love and see people, it just feels so, um, a unique, first of all, very you, but you know, it feels like that being a woman has really affected your leadership style and being a mom has affected your leadership style. And I'm curious if you see it that way, being that you are a different kind of leader because you're a woman and specifically a millennial woman.
Absolutely. I definitely, even upon taking office, obviously I was pretty young, but I considered myself to be like a mom for the city, that I wanted to just, care for it, just restore it, encourage it, the same things that my mother did for me, but also at the same time to have a strict vision, a plan, to stick to that, to sacrifice to make that happen. But again, it's just whenever there's a doubt, just pour out some more love, keep going forward. So I think that that's really the difference a lot of times with women and men, unfortunately, in leadership positions.
Your second term is getting close to its end. I know the city of Compton is going to want you to continue there. You had considered briefly, I think, running for Congress, but you had to not do that because you were pregnant at the time with your now 2-year-old daughter, your beautiful daughter. By the way, I should have mentioned that at the beginning, that while you were handling all these things so beautifully in the city of Compton, including what's going on right now, you also have a toddler at home, which is, as we know, 2-year-old's not the easiest year. So it's unbelievable that you're balancing all these things. As you look to your future, what do you see for yourself?
Honestly, I know that I'll be someplace affecting change. I don't know if I'll always be in politics or if I'll be continuously in politics. I really, what's on my heart right now is just community development, economic development. My background is in economic development, so I really want to create wealth for my city. I think the only way to combat poverty is through wealth creation. I want to see people, small businesses develop. I want to see people have access to technology tools. I want to make sure my city has the core infrastructure to grow. So I'm really focusing on a community development corporation, and I want to see how much we can make that grow and have an impact for my city.
And you have, by the way, we didn't have a lot of time to get into some of the details of that. We talked about crime, but you've brought Fortune 500 companies to your city. You've created over 1,000 good jobs for your city. You've implemented housing programs where, families can own houses and hold on to houses because that, as we know, is such an important part of generational wealth and preserving wealth in the community. You've brought investment, you've brought celebrities who have made, Kendrick Lamar and Dr. Dre just donated $10 million for a community center. The Williams sisters are investing in Compton. So there's been plenty of economic growth. And I think it was because when I was reading about you, there'd be things in the comments section. And one of the things that I thought was so great is there would be people saying, for a Democrat, this woman has really brought great business to our city. And there was other people that were saying, I'm a Republican, but I'm still going to vote for her because she knows her business. And so I thought that was actually really, a sign of the success that you've had, that people recognize, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, the job's been getting done.
Absolutely. I'm just about bringing people together to have a greater impact. We're just so much stronger together. So that's what I love to do.
Will you reconsider your run for Congress?
No, not right now at all. I hope to see, I just hope to see a different level of leadership. And I don't want to waste my years fighting partisan battles that are not near and dear to me. I'd rather spend my time helping people live better and really having that impact. So no Congress for me. I was willing to serve when I was asked because people were so concerned that the seat would turn Republican at the time because Trump was on his wave. So it was more about stability for my community, but I have no desire to fly back and forth to Washington, especially with my family.
Well, I'm sure the city of Compton will be thrilled if you are planning on staying for a third term. I don't want to hog all the time, and I'm trying to open it to questions, but I have to admit I'm a little bit tech challenged, so I can't find where the questions are. So maybe Piera, who's helping us, can assist me. And I'm not sure I know, I'm sure people have been sending them, but I can't see them. Oh, wait, hold on. Is it under chat?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. A question for, okay. So Mayor Brown, we have a question. As an organization of women supporting women, how can we best support your efforts individually or as a collective in the city of Compton? I love that question.
Thank you so much for that question. I'm just such a big proponent of positioning people to do what they love to do. I mean, we have so many different initiatives. Like I'm working on the Innovation Hub in our downtown revitalization. So we'll be working on all the improvements and building all that out. We're focusing a lot on arts because I believe Compton, obviously, we have a great position in the world and affecting culture. But I believe that we'll be the culture capital of the world with all the talent we have. So we're marrying arts and tech and innovation in collaborative spaces. We're also focused on just basic beautification. We have Clean Compton initiative, so we're installing murals throughout the city. We're changing vacant lots into community gardens and just doing the grunt work, which is beautiful. So it just depends on what people would love to be a part of. I'd love to provide maybe some options to your group via email and just to let you know what initiatives that we're currently working on. If there's any interest, I'd love to maybe have a smaller focus group, and then we can figure out how to best utilize everyone's tools and resources and their expertise.
I think there's going to be interest. We are going to be staying in touch with you, Mayor Brown. We have a question from Janine. How have you been able to collaborate with Compton Unified School District, and what are your goals for the future with regards to that? Did you face the same challenges that LAUSD did when moving to remote learning?
Yes. Well, first of all, Compton Unified School District, they have a separate elected body. They have their own political challenges, but I have been successful in bringing great partnerships to Compton Unified School District. We also brought Dr. Dre in to donate for the Performing Arts Center to the district. So I just focus on how I can bring resources. When they allow me to come on campus and connect with the kids, I come, but it just depends, honestly, and to be transparent, it depends on the political will of those that are in those positions. So, and it always hasn't been favorable, unfortunately, but it's not unlike the same phenomena that a lot of mayors have with their school districts around the nation.
More recently with the pandemic, how did you face the same challenges with the remote learning? I know there was problems with access and having iPads or computers or phones or whatever to actually connect. How did that work in your city?
The first couple of weeks that we were on the stay-at-home order, there was a big rush to make sure we had all the technology to roll out to the students. But by the third week, all of the students had iPads with Wi-Fi because there's internet connectivity issues at home as well, and they were able to be online. But even from my understanding and just speaking informally with teachers, there's still some challenges, and so I'm hoping that they are continuing to work through that. I actually put a call in to Compton Unified earlier this morning just to see what's happening because another partner would like to do some free wireless in the city. So just always trying to overcome challenges, but they did pretty well, I can say, with this quick transition. And I was just happy that they already had some tech devices available. They put rush orders in to get additional, and most students were serviced.
Did any corporations step in to help with that? Were there any donations for devices, or? I know that
I'm aware of, but it is a possibility. I know that they had Apple iPads, and they had already a relationship with Apple, so they definitely had those Apple devices, but I'm not sure about any additional support.
a question from Allison. Can you discuss how we can work towards increased voter turnout in the community of people of color?
I think education is the key. I myself have committed to doing just the informal civics podcast to let people know how government works, who does what, who's responsible for what, and then to really highlight opportunities to affect change systemically. For instance, we have an upcoming election. There's a chance to elect a new district attorney. There's an opportunity to be able to, we just approved the subpoena power for citizen oversight. So those are just some windows of opportunity we have on the justice forefront. But I think people just need to be informed. I think, number one, they have to be engaged. And thankfully, that's one of the silver linings of the COVID-19 pandemic. More people are paying attention And then they have to be educated, and then I think they'll be empowered to be a participant in the process. And I'm constantly combating the false narrative that our vote doesn't count. And it's just such a lie from the pit of hell that people really believe. And I believe it was strategically planted in places of color so that they wouldn't utilize their power to affect change and have the representation that they deserve. So I'm going to take the education route. Hopefully we'll have some great results. And I've also partnered with Michelle Obama's When We All Vote. And so I'll see what additional tools and initiatives that they plan on rolling out as well. But I think education really is the key.
Especially, it's really difficult in our media climate. So I think the presidential races, those federal races, take up so much of the oxygen in the room that people just naturally tend to forget that the types like voting for your district attorney, those elections, those local, those state, those civic elections could have perhaps much more of an effect on your day-to-day life than who's sitting in the White House in some cases. So it's, there's so many organizations now that are trying to get more women to run for office. She should run. What would you say as someone who's didn't see themselves as a politician and decided to do it? I'm sure that you understand how difficult it is to convince women like yourself who are successful and smart and who should be running for office that they are qualified. It's one of those problems that men never seem to have. They never seem to worry about if they're qualified before they do something, but
right in there, and they're there doing what they
I can do it.
Exactly. I just think we have to really be intentional about redefining what a politician is. When we think politician, there's an immediate divide, but a politician is just someone that's supposed to be solving problems. So if you can solve problems and you have innovative approaches, different perspectives, then you can make a valuable impact and a difference at any level. And I always encourage people that all politics is local. It truly is. How we live really is hinged on at the local level and your local leadership. And even when President Obama was in the White House, I would always convey to my community that he's not coming down in Air Force One to save us. We have to do this ourselves. And this is something that we cannot rely on anyone in Washington or quite frankly in Sacramento either. This is we're all we have. So we have to find these solutions to effect change. And all we just need are people that are willing to think outside the box. And I think women are so innately equipped to do that. I mean, we're just natural problem solvers. We do everything, raising kids. I mean, we're doctors, lawyers, teachers, everything, nurses. So women are strategically, I think, positioned to really be on the forefront of just system changing policy reform. And I know that we'll see more women coming into office. I believe that in my lifetime, we'll have more women serving than men. So I'm excited about our future for sure.
By the way, as you're saying this, I have all these comments coming through saying, yes, agreed. Thank you, Mayor Brown. Thank you for your contribution. You've got a lot of people agreeing with you. One thing that I've been curious about your leadership in Compton is that you had family history in Compton. Some people don't know you didn't grow up in Compton. Your grandmother had lived there. Your mom grew up there and then left to raise you. You have a twin brother, and she left and she raised you and your twin brother in Altadena, and you went to high school in Pasadena. And of course, as I mentioned, you went to USC. And your family had faced some tragedy back in Compton. So you really knew about the hardship the city was facing. You were very successful. You had a very good job. You'd worked at in Pasadena and a couple other cities, and you made the choice to go back to Compton. You could have stayed in planning in Pasadena or gone on to any number of roles across the nation. I mean, with all your credentials, a lot of people would have said, no, I'm never stepping foot in that city again. And I think it took really an extraordinary amount of courage to do what you did. What made you decide to go back to Compton?
Really my faith. I had made a commitment to God in my personal life that I would let him use me wherever he wanted to. And he literally just redirected my life so swiftly. And it's just nothing short of miraculous. When I tell you that my husband and I, we were not even thinking about coming back to Compton, but my executive secretary, who's a great friend of mine, she invited me to come to a Bible study in Compton, and she had just started going to the Bible study. So make a long story short, I started, we started going to Bible study, then we started doing mission work on Saturdays. We were witnessing to women on Long Beach Boulevard that were involved in prostitution. We were doing beautification, working with kids. And then within a 3-month time span, literally, we bought our home, we changed our church, and then I was offered a position in the city of Compton's redevelopment agency. So I went from, really not having spent a lot of time there as an adult to literally living 1 block from City Hall, going to church 1 block from City Hall, and my whole world was in this nexus in the center of the city. So I knew that I was called to be here. But even when I moved back, I didn't know that I would run for mayor. I just thought that I would be doing urban planning and building great projects because I just saw so much potential in Compton, just with the infrastructure, the location advantage. There was just so much to do. So I was just really excited from a practical standpoint to be able to affect change. And then I started seeing so much corruption that just was brought to me. I couldn't even ignore it. And I just said, our city is never going to change if we don't have some better leadership. And then after so many different signs and confirmations, I'm like, okay, this is my assignment. So I stepped out there by faith, having no experience. I hadn't even ever been involved in a campaign. I didn't even really know who all of my elected officials were that covered Compton. For me, it was just about walking by faith. So that's where my courage came from, my faith.
Speaking of faith, we actually have a question about that from someone who's asking, do you work with the faith-based community in Compton and other churches, and are they involved in any of your coalitions?
Oh, absolutely. The church, I believe, is critical infrastructure. So when I first came on, we assembled the church together just like any other stakeholder and really challenged them to come outside the 4 walls and to use their organization and their capacity to affect more change across the city. So that's what we do. Even with our COVID-19 pandemic relief, we have our churches have stepped up in an incredible way. They're utilizing their transportation to deliver meals to seniors. They have all their bodies working in our food bank. So they've really stepped up to be a force multiplier, and they've always been a great asset in the city.
Wow. Mayor Brown, this has been an extraordinary talk with you. I know we could keep you here for the rest of the day and never let you go. As I mentioned, we have so many comments from people saying, that you're incredible, that they want to stay involved with you, and we certainly will. I think you are an inspiration, and you have kind of really dynamic leadership that, frankly, our country needs right now to into a new future. So thank you for coming and taking time to share your vision with us, and really thank you for what you have done for our city, because your work in Compton benefits all Angelenos.